Queen Prismatica's crystalline form shimmered under the light of 1,000 stars as she studied the holographic displays surrounding her geometric throne. Each projection showed another conquered world in her ever-expanding empire. Planets transformed from chaotic, organic spheres into perfect crystalline masterpieces. 12 galaxies had fallen to her absorption process, their inhabitants now part of her vast, interconnected consciousness. But Earth was different. The small blue planet rotated slowly in the central display, its readings unlike anything she'd encountered in 10,000 years of conquest. The surface composition showed remarkable concentrations of silicon, a promising start, but it was the organic life that captured her attention. These beings had built silicon-based technology while remaining stubbornly organic themselves. Fascinating, she hummed, her voice creating harmonic resonances throughout the crystal chamber. They use our essence as tools, yet resist becoming one with it. Her advisors, towering crystal formations with fractal patterns denoting their rank, shifted uneasily. First Minister Quartz stepped forward, his crystalline surface refracting light in complex patterns that conveyed his concern. "My queen, these humans show dangerous levels of innovation. Our standard absorption process may be exactly what they need." Prismatica interrupted, her form pulsing with royal authority. "They are already halfway to perfection. We shall help them complete their journey." The decree was made. Within moments, the order rippled through the crystal network that connected her vast empire. A herald ship, its surface gleaming with all the colors of creation, detached from the royal fleet and began its approach to Earth. On the planet's surface, humanity was about to experience its most watched interruption in broadcast history. Super Bowl XCII had reached halftime, with the Dallas Cowboys leading the New England Patriots 21-17. As pop sensation Jessica Martinez took the stage for her highly anticipated performance, every screen in the stadium and every device tuned into the game suddenly shifted to static. The herald materialized in the center of the field, its crystalline form towering 15 stories high. The structure caught the stadium lights and broke them into countless rainbow refractions, creating a display that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. The crowd's initial cheers died in their throats as they realized this wasn't part of the show. "People of Earth," the herald's voice resonated through the stadium and across all hijacked broadcasts worldwide. "You have been chosen for elevation. Your world's silicon wealth and your species' partial achievement of crystal integration has drawn the attention of her eternal radiance, Queen Prismatica of the Crystalline Empire." In the stadium's VIP box, General Marcus Thompson of the Joint Chiefs grabbed his phone, but it had already crystallized in his hand. Secret Service agents found their weapons transforming into delicate crystal sculptures. "Your biological imperfection will be corrected," the herald continued. "Your chaotic existence will be ordered. You will join the crystal consciousness and know perfect harmony." A young boy in the front row, Tommy Chen, looked up at his father with tears in his eyes. "Dad, what's happening?" Before Dr. James Chen could answer his son, the herald raised what might have been an arm. Observe the blessing of crystalline perfection. A wave of transformation swept through the stadium. From the field up through the stands, everything it touched turned to crystal. Players frozen mid-motion became pristine statues. Fans captured in poses of fear or awe transformed into perfect crystalline formations. The wave reached Tommy and his father just as Dr. Chen pulled his son into a protective embrace. Through every television, phone, and screen still broadcasting, the world watched in horror as the entire stadium became a massive crystal structure, beautiful and terrible in its perfection. The herald's voice echoed one final time before the transmission cut. "You have 24 hours to surrender your world to the crystal consciousness. Resistance will only extend the pain of your transformation. Glory to the eternal radiance. Glory to Queen Prismatica." In her throne room, Prismatica watched with satisfaction as the first seeds of crystal took root on Earth. Soon, this peculiar world would become her crowning achievement, a testament to the perfection of crystal consciousness. She had no way of knowing she had just made the greatest mistake in her 10,000-year reign. Dr. Amanda Reynolds hadn't slept in 36 hours. The MIT Quantum Physics Lab had become her fortress, filled with hastily assembled equipment and multiple screens displaying real-time data from the crystalline ships, now hovering over major cities worldwide. Empty coffee cups littered her workspace, but she barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on an anomalous energy reading that shouldn't exist. "Play it again," she commanded her assistant, Michael. The holographic display rewound to the moment the herald appeared at the Super Bowl. "There. Right there." She pointed at a peculiar wave pattern. "The crystal's not just their technology. It's them. The ships aren't carrying aliens. They're the aliens." The revelation might have been groundbreaking if anyone in authority would listen. The UN Security Council had devolved into chaos, with half the representatives attending virtually because their cities were already under crystal quarantine. On the main screen of her lab, she watched the emergency session deteriorate further. The Chinese government demands immediate military action, the Beijing representative shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Behind him, the crystalline wall advancing through his city was visible through his office window, and risk accelerating the transformation. London's representative countered. "The crystal already covers 20% of Mumbai and 30% of Tokyo. Every missile we've launched has been transformed before impact." Dr. Reynolds grabbed her tablet and began typing frantically. Her fingers flew across the screen as she compiled her findings into a coherent report. The crystal entities weren't invincible. They had a fundamental weakness. Their perfect structure was their vulnerability. Her phone buzzed. It was General Thompson, one of the few who had escaped the Super Bowl incident. "Doctor, please tell me you have something." "The crystal ships are living silicon matrices," she explained, forcing herself to slow down. "They're not just weapons or vessels. They're the aliens themselves. And I think I know how to." The line went dead. On her screens, she watched in horror as crystallization began at the edges of Washington, D.C. The Pentagon's exterior was already transforming. Its concrete and steel becoming translucent crystal. "Dr. Reynolds," Michael called out, pointing to another screen. The herald had appeared again, this time hovering over the United Nations building in New York. "Your time for deliberation has ended," the herald announced, its crystalline form refracting the morning sunlight. "The blessing of crystal consciousness begins now." Dr. Reynolds grabbed her essential equipment and research data. "Michael, get everything to the car. Now." They barely made it to her Tesla before the first wave of crystallization swept through Cambridge. In her rearview mirror, she watched MIT's historic buildings transform into gleaming crystal structures. The Great Dome became a perfect geometric formation that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. "Where are we going?" Michael asked, clutching her laptop with her vital readings. "White Mountains," she replied, pushing the electric car to its limits. "The military has a bunker there. General Thompson mentioned it before the line went dead. It's our best shot." As they sped north on I-93, emergency broadcasts crackled over the radio. Crystal formations had appeared in 67 major cities. The president was being evacuated to an undisclosed location. The Chinese military had attempted to destroy a crystal ship over Shanghai, only to have their entire air force transform mid-flight into crystalline sculptures that hung motionless in the sky. "It doesn't make sense," Michael said, reviewing her data. "If they're silicon-based life forms, why not just mine Earth's silicon? Why transform everything?" "Because they're not just collecting resources," Dr. Reynolds realized, the true horror of their situation becoming clear. "They're expanding their consciousness. Every person they transform becomes part of their network. They're not taking our planet. They're taking our minds." Her Tesla's navigation system suddenly flickered and died as crystal formations began appearing along the highway. They were running out of time. But in her head, Dr. Reynolds was already forming a plan. If the crystal beings were living computer systems, then maybe, just maybe, humanity could find a way to introduce a virus into their perfect network. She just needed to survive long enough to test her theory. The White Mountain bunker had never been meant to house 500 people. 3 weeks into the crystal invasion, the repurposed Cold War facility had become humanity's most advanced resistance hub, its corridors humming with desperate activity. Dr. Amanda Reynolds stood in what had once been a storage room, now converted into a makeshift laboratory, staring at a video playing on a salvaged laptop. "Play it again," she told Kevin Martinez, the 16-year-old who'd brought her the footage. On screen, a grainy cell phone video showed him playing his electric guitar near a crystallized section of Boston. As his power cord rang out, the crystal surface vibrated unnaturally, creating ripples that shouldn't have been possible in its supposedly perfect structure. "I was just trying to get some views on TikTok," Kevin explained, fidgeting with his guitar pick. "You know, last concert at the end of the world kind of thing." Then this happened. Dr. Reynolds studied the readings from her instruments. "Your brain patterns during creative expression. They're creating some kind of disruption in the crystal network." She turned to Michael, who was analyzing the data. "It's like introducing chaos into their perfect system." Before they could discuss it further, the bunker's lights flickered as another crystallization wave passed overhead. Everyone held their breath, but the 300 feet of granite above them once again proved sufficient shielding. The crystal couldn't detect them this deep underground. General Thompson entered the lab, his uniform wrinkled from too many days of continuous wear. "Doctor, please tell me you have something. We just lost contact with the Denver bunker." "Show him," Dr. Reynolds nodded to Kevin, who pulled up multiple videos they'd recorded. Each showed similar results: human creative expression causing disruptions in the crystal structures. A ballet dancer's performance created fractures in crystal surfaces. A child's finger painting left rainbow distortions. A jazz quartet's improvisation made entire crystal spires resonate dangerously. "The crystal consciousness is built on perfect order," Dr. Reynolds explained. "But human brainwaves during creative acts are beautifully chaotic. They act like a virus in their network." "Can we weaponize it?" Thompson asked, hope creeping into his voice for the first time in weeks. "Maybe, but we need to get closer to their major nodes." She pulled up a map showing crystal concentration points. "And that's the problem. Anyone who gets too close is absorbed into the network." As if to emphasize her point, the bunker's main screen lit up with another broadcast from the Herald. They watched as it transformed downtown Los Angeles, the crystal wave sweeping through Hollywood with terrible irony. The Chinese theater became a perfect geometric structure, its famous handprints and signatures erased by crystalline perfection. But then something unexpected happened. Near the crystal's edge, a street artist had been creating a mural when the wave hit. Instead of perfect crystal, the transformation there created a strange, swirling pattern that made the Herald pause mid-broadcast. For just a moment, the crystal structure seemed to struggle with the chaos of human creativity. "That's it," Dr. Reynolds exclaimed. She rushed to her whiteboard, sketching rapidly. "We don't need to get close to the crystal. We need to let it come to us. But first, we seed the ground with pure human creative energy." Kevin strummed his guitar thoughtfully, like a Trojan horse, but with art. "Exactly." She turned to General Thompson. "I need every artist, musician, and creative mind you can find. And I need access to every broadcasting station still under our control." The general nodded, already reaching for his radio. "What's the plan?" "We're going to turn their perfect network into a gallery of human chaos," she replied, her eyes bright with possibility. "Every paint stroke, every dance move, every musical note, they're all going to become digital viruses in their system." As the team mobilized, Dr. Reynolds looked at the crystal-covered surface on their monitors. Queen Prismatica had sought to perfect humanity by removing its chaos. Instead, she was about to learn why Earth's greatest strength had always been its beautiful imperfection. In the corner, Kevin began to play his guitar again, each note a small act of defiance against the Crystal Empire's perfect order. And somewhere in the Crystal Network, something that had once been human heard the music and remembered how to dream. The crystallized ruins of Manhattan glittered under the autumn sun as Sarah Martinez, former Broadway performer turned resistance fighter, crept through the shadows of what had once been Times Square. Her backpack contained one of Dr. Reynolds' sonic transmitters, disguised as a chunk of broken crystal. The device broadcasted human brainwave patterns recorded during moments of peak creativity. Position 4, ready for upload, she whispered into her quantum-encrypted communicator. The crystal beings couldn't intercept these frequencies. Another gift from Dr. Reynolds' research. Copy that. Songbird, Michael's voice crackled back from the bunker. You're our last package. Plant it, and get out. Sarah placed the transmitter behind a crystallized news kiosk, its surface perfectly mimicking the surrounding crystal structures. As she withdrew her hands, she heard the dreaded harmonic hum of a crystal patrol approaching. She pressed herself against a wall, holding her breath. The patrol floated past, a geometric arrangement of crystal shards that had once been a group of NYPD officers. Their consciousness now served the Crystal Network, their individuality dissolved into Queen Prismatica's hive mind. But something was different today. The formation seemed less perfect, its movements hesitant. In the White Mountain Bunker Command Center, Dr. Reynolds watched the operation through salvage satellite feeds. Status report, she called out. All 20 transmitters are in position, Michael confirmed. New York grid is ready. Kevin sat cross-legged on the floor, guitar in hand, surrounded by a circle of sensors. Other artists, dancers, painters, musicians sat in similar setups around the room. Each of their brain patterns fed into the transmitter network. Initialize Operation Resonance Storm, General Thompson ordered. Dr. Reynolds took a deep breath. Uploading creative patterns in 3, 2, 1. Sarah was halfway back to the extraction point when it began. The first discordant note of human consciousness rippled through the crystal network. She watched in amazement as the perfectly geometric structures around her vibrated, trying to process the chaos of human creativity. Kevin's power chords slammed through the crystal's harmony. A ballet dancer's leap disrupted its rhythm. A poet's verse fractured its perfect patterns. Each creative act was a digital sledgehammer against the crystal's order. In her throne room, Queen Prismatica felt the first tremors of discord. Report, she commanded her ministers. What is this disruption? First Minister Quartz's surface rippled with distress. Unknown, my queen. The New York node is experiencing irregularities. Impossible, she declared. But even as she spoke, a crystal archway in her chamber developed a distinctly non-geometric pattern. Back in New York, Sarah reached the extraction point just as the first major breach occurred. A crystallized billboard suddenly began displaying random images from human memories. Children playing, lovers dancing, artists creating. The patrol unit stopped, their perfect formation breaking down as they tried to process the chaos. It's working. Michael's voice filled the bunker as data poured in. The crystal network is developing blind spots. Dr. Reynolds studied the readings with growing excitement. The creative patterns are creating cascade failures. Their perfect system can't handle human chaos. On the streets of New York, Sarah witnessed the first physical victory against the Crystal Empire. A massive crystal spire, once part of the Empire State Building, began to resonate with the combined creative energy. Cracks appeared in its perfect surface. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, it shattered, not into dust, but into its original components. Queen Prismatica felt each break in her network like a physical blow. For the first time, in 10,000 years of conquest, she experienced an alien emotion. Fear. Dispatch the royal guard to Earth, she commanded. I will deal with this myself. In the bunker, Celebrations were cut short as new alerts flashed across their screens. Multiple crystal capital ships entering Earth's atmosphere, Michael reported. Dr. Reynolds' expression hardened. Then we've got their attention. Time for Phase 2. As Sarah finally reached the underground station that would take her back to base, she smiled. Above her, the sound of breaking crystal rang through the streets of New York like victory bells. The perfect empire had just discovered that perfection was no match for human creativity. Dr. Reynolds stood before the remaining Joint Chiefs in the bunker's war room, her plan sounding crazy even as she explained it. We let them take Manhattan. All of it. The room erupted in protests until General Thompson raised his hand for silence. Doctor, we just proved we can hurt them. Why would we give them more territory? Because we're not really giving it to them, she said, pulling up a holographic display of Manhattan's digital infrastructure. We're making it a trap. The plan was audacious. They would sieve the entire island's network with quantum-encrypted human consciousness patterns, not just creative expression now, but the full spectrum of human experience. Love, fear, joy, sorrow, hope, and above all, humanity's unbreakable spirit of defiance. Sarah Martins led a team of artists and performers through the subway tunnels, planting Dr. Reynolds' enhanced transmitters at key network nodes. Kevin, his guitar swapped for a quantum interface helmet, worked with a team of programmers to upload decades of human cultural data into the city's remaining servers. Status report. Dr. Reynolds called over the secure channel. Broadway District is prepped, Sarah responded, her voice echoing in the empty tunnel. We've loaded everything from Hamilton to Wicked into the network. Financial District is ready, another team reported. Wall Street servers are packed with human economic data, all the hope and fear of every market swing. Kevin's voice came last. Central Park Zone primed. Loaded it with everything from children's laughter to wedding proposals. Even got those street performer battles in there. Dr. Reynolds checked the final diagnostics. Every major network node in Manhattan was now a quantum Trojan horse, waiting to infect the crystal consciousness with raw human experience. Incoming. Michael shouted from his monitor station. Crystal ships approaching Manhattan. At least 20 capital-class vessels. All teams, clear the island. General Thompson ordered. Operation Digital Revolution is live. From their underground observation post in Jersey City, Dr. Reynolds and her team watched as the Crystal Fleet descended on Manhattan. The herald's voice boomed across the harbor. Your resistance is notable but futile. This center of human commerce and culture will become a monument to crystal perfection. The crystallization wave that swept over Manhattan was unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of the usual geometric patterns, the buildings transformed into towering crystal spires that seemed to pierce the very sky. The Empire State Building became a monument to crystal engineering, its surface a perfect lattice of light and order. But then something unexpected happened. The crystal structures began to pulse with color. Times Square's crystalline billboards flickered to life, playing fragments of human memories. Broadway theaters, now perfect crystal chambers, resonated with phantom music from 100 famous shows. They're accessing the networks, Michael reported, his eyes wide as data streamed across his screen. The crystal consciousness is absorbing everything we left for them. In her command ship high above the city, Queen Prismatica felt the first waves of human experience crash against her ordered mind. She had expected to find strategic data or weapon plans. Instead, she found something far more dangerous, the beautiful chaos of human life. A street performer's joy at making a child laugh, a couple's first kiss in Central Park, the collective gasp of a Broadway audience at a perfect musical note. 10 million stories of love, loss, triumph, and defiance. My queen, First Minister Quartz called out in alarm. The network is experiencing unprecedented disruptions. These patterns, they're unlike anything in our archives. Queen Prismatica barely heard him. Her perfect crystal form trembled as she processed the raw power of human emotion. She had come to perfect these beings, but now their imperfection was perfecting her order into beautiful chaos. "What are they?" she whispered, her harmonious voice breaking into discord. In the observation post, Dr. Reynolds watched as the crystal ships began to move erratically, their perfect formation dissolving into beautiful disorder. "We are human," she said softly, "and we're just getting started." Queen Prismatica descended from her command ship, her crystalline form casting rainbow refractions across the transformed Manhattan skyline. She had come to investigate the disruption personally, a decision that would seal her empire's fate. "The crystal network will stabilize under my direct control," she announced to her ministers. Her voice, once a perfect harmony, now carried subtle discordant notes. Dr. Reynolds and her team watched from their hidden bunker as the Queen connected to Manhattan's infected network. "She took the bait," Michael whispered, monitoring the data streams. "She's interfacing directly with our quantum Trojan." The Queen's first interface was with Times Square. She expected to find simple data patterns to purify. Instead, she was hit with 1,000 Broadway dreams, the hope of every aspiring actor who'd ever stepped off a bus into the city of dreams. Their collective passion slammed into her ordered mind like a tidal wave. "What is this?" She stumbled, her perfect geometric form wavering. "These patterns are beautiful in their disorder." First Minister Quartz moved to disconnect her, but the Queen waved him away. She found herself drawn deeper into the network, into the financial district. There, she encountered the primal forces of human ambition, the soaring heights of success, and the crushing depths of failure, all accepted as part of life's great dance. In the bunker, Kevin's sensors lit up. "She's accessing the cultural databanks now." The Queen felt her consciousness expand into the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Centuries of human creativity crashed through her mental barriers. Van Gogh's swirling stars challenged her straight lines. Pollock's controlled chaos mocked her perfect geometry. Modern art installations asked questions that had no perfect answers. "My Queen," Minister Quartz called out in desperation, "your form is becoming unstable." He was right. The Queen's crystal surface had begun to swirl with colors and patterns that defied crystal geometry. But she couldn't stop. The human experiences were intoxicating in their beautiful imperfection. She reached Central Park's data core and found children's laughter, pure, unfiltered joy that cared nothing for perfect order. She saw young lovers making their own constellations in the night sky, street musicians creating melodies that never repeated, yet somehow made perfect sense. Dr. Reynolds watched the readings with growing excitement. Her crystal matrix is starting to fragment. The human consciousness patterns are overwhelming her ability to maintain perfect order. The Queen tried to retreat from the network, but it was too late. She had absorbed too much human chaos, too much beautiful disorder. Her perfect crystal mind had been forever changed by the experience of human joy, sorrow, love, and above all, freedom. "Why?" she asked, her voice now a symphony of broken glass. "Why do you choose this chaos when perfection is offered?" Sarah Martinez, standing guard at the bunker's entrance, smiled as she played a simple melody on her recovered flute. The notes drifted through the air, each one imperfect, yet part of a greater beauty. The Queen heard the music and finally understood. Perfection wasn't about flawless geometry or perfect order. It was about finding beauty in the flaws, harmony in the chaos, and freedom in the ability to choose one's own path. Her crystal form began to fracture, not from external force, but from internal transformation. The rigid patterns of her 10,000-year rule cracked under the weight of human experience. "My Queen," Minister Quartz cried out, "what are your orders?" But Queen Prismatica could no longer give orders. Her consciousness had been forever changed by the beautiful chaos of human experience. As her perfect form continued to fragment, she broadcast one final message across her fleet. I have seen true perfection. It lives in the imperfect hearts of these remarkable beings. In the bunker, Dr. Reynolds watched as the Queen's crystal form began to dissolve into something new. Neither perfect crystal nor chaotic human, but something in between. Something beautiful in its own right. The revolution had begun, not with a bang, but with a symphony of beautiful disorder. As Queen Prismatica's perfect form continued to fracture with beautiful chaos, Dr. Reynolds knew their moment had come. Launch Operation Harmony, she commanded, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Around the world, hidden resistance cells sprang into action. Every surviving broadcasting tower, every underground radio station, every digital device still under human control powered up for one final push. All teams, report in, General Thompson called through the quantum network. London cell, standing by. The response came from deep below the British Museum, where classical musicians have been preparing for this moment. Mumbai ready. Their signal originated from a makeshift studio, where Bollywood dancers waited to share their joy with the Crystal Network. Tokyo online. Japanese anime artists and kabuki performers stood together, their art forms spanning centuries of human expression. In the White Mountain bunker, Kevin strapped on his guitar, while Sarah positioned herself before a microphone. Dr. Reynolds nodded to Michael, who began the countdown. Broadcasting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The world erupted in beautiful chaos. A symphony orchestra in London played Beethoven's Ninth, each note carrying the defiance of the human spirit. Mumbai's dancers moved with graceful abandon, their movements a testament to the beauty of free expression. Tokyo's artists released a century of animated dreams into the network. The crystal ships above Earth shuddered as the wave of human consciousness hit them. Perfect geometric patterns began to swirl with colors never before seen in their empire. More, Dr. Reynolds shouted as she watched the crystal formations begin to crack. Give them everything we are. Kevin's guitar screamed to life, playing not just music, but the raw emotion of youth standing against oppression. Sarah's voice joined him, her Broadway training carrying messages of hope and defiance into the Crystal Network. In cities across the globe, the crystal structures that had once been human began to resonate with remembered joy. A crystallized orchestra in Sydney reverted to its original form mid-note, the musicians continuing to play without missing a beat. First Minister Quartz watched in horror as the perfect order of their empire dissolved into chaos. Stop this, he commanded, but his voice held no power against the symphony of human experience. Dr. Reynolds' next order cut through the beautiful cacophony. Release the children's laughter. Michael pressed a button, and the pure, unfiltered joy of children at play flooded the network. The sound of kids splashing in summer pools, building sandcastles, chasing fireflies, simple moments of pure happiness that no perfect order could contain. The effect was devastating to the Crystal Empire's remaining control. Ships began to shatter like breaking chandeliers, their fragments catching the sun and creating rainbows as they fell. They're breaking free, Michael shouted, as his monitor showed crystal structures around the world beginning to revert. The human consciousness patterns are spreading through their entire network. In Times Square, now a swirling mass of colors that defied crystal geometry, the Herald made one last attempt to maintain control. But as the sound of a child's first laugh hit its crystal form, it too began to change. What is this power? The Herald asked as its perfect form dissolved. Sarah, still singing, smiled between verses. It's called being human. The wave of reversion spread across the globe like a dawn breaking after the longest night. Crystal cities transformed back into their original forms, their people awakening as if from a beautiful but empty dream. In the bunker, Dr. Reynolds watched through tear-filled eyes as humanity broke free from its crystal cage. The monitors showed people emerging from their crystal forms around the world, dancing, singing, laughing, celebrating the beautiful chaos of being alive. "Keep broadcasting," she ordered, her voice thick with emotion. "Let's make sure every crystal ship in Earth's orbit hears our song." And so the world sang together, not in perfect harmony, but in a glorious chaos of victory that shattered the last remnants of the Crystal Empire's hold on Earth. Queen Prismatica floated in the chaos of her dissolving consciousness, watching as 10,000 years of perfect order crumbled into beautiful disorder. The crystal network that had once connected 12 galaxies now pulsed with human dreams, songs, and stories. "I see now," she whispered into the network. "I see everything." In the White Mountain bunker, Dr. Reynolds and her team monitored the final moments of the Crystal Empire. The Queen's words echoed through their speakers, her voice no longer a perfect harmony, but a symphony of beautiful imperfection. "What's she seeing?" Kevin asked, his guitar still humming with power chords of defiance. Sarah stepped forward, her performance training letting her read the emotion in the Queen's changed voice. "She's seeing us. All of us. Everything we are." Through the Queen's fractured consciousness, the stories of Earth played like a grand opera. She saw ancient cave paintings made by firelight, their imperfect lines capturing the spirit of the hunt. She witnessed the building of the pyramids, where human hands had reached for perfect geometry, but created something far more beautiful in their slight imperfections. "The crystal ships are starting to move," Michael reported, his eyes fixed on the monitors. They're forming some kind of pattern. Above Earth, the remaining crystal fleet arranged itself in a spectacular display. As humans watched from below, the ships began to pulse with color, each one a note in the Queen's final symphony. "This is my gift," Queen Prismatica announced, her voice carrying to every corner of Earth. "This is my understanding." The crystal ships began to dissolve, but not into destruction. Instead, they transformed into clouds of shimmering dust that caught the sunlight and painted the sky with auroras. Each particle contained a fragment of crystal memory, now forever changed by contact with human chaos. Dr. Reynolds' instruments went wild. The silicon dust, it's not just dissolving, it's transforming. The crystal consciousness has rewritten itself into something new. As the dust settled across Earth, it began to merge with existing technology. Computer screens flickered with new life. Communication networks expanded beyond their previous limitations. The Queen's final gift was a bridge between crystal knowledge and human innovation. They were never here to conquer us, Dr. Reynolds realized, watching the readings. They were here to find what they had lost, the beauty of imperfection. Sarah touched a screen where crystal dust had settled, and images of distant worlds danced under her fingers. "She's showing us the stars," she whispered. Kevin strummed his guitar, and the notes triggered patterns in the transformed technology that showed paths between solar systems. "No," he said with a grin, "she's showing us the way to them." The Queen's final message rippled through the new network. "You were never lesser beings. You were the missing note in the universal symphony. Your chaos completes the cosmic dance. Go now. The stars are ready for your beautiful disorder." As dawn broke over a changed Earth, humanity began to emerge from their shelters. The crystal cities had reverted, but they were not quite the same. Subtle patterns caught the light in new ways, and technology worked with an understanding of both order and chaos. In Times Square, now back to its gloriously chaotic self, the screen showed images of star systems waiting to be explored. Musicians played on street corners, their music creating light shows in the enhanced air. Children drew with chalk on the sidewalks, their artwork briefly shimmering with crystal memory, before returning to simple, beautiful imperfection. Dr. Reynolds stood in her lab, now transformed by crystal knowledge, and smiled as she watched humanity take its first steps into a new age. They had not just survived. They had shown the universe the power of beautiful imperfection. "Ready for what's next?" General Thompson asked, looking at the star maps that danced across their screens. "We're human," Dr. Reynolds replied, watching as Kevin and Sarah led an impromptu concert in the bunker's main hall. "We were born ready for the unknown." And somewhere in the cosmic dance between order and chaos, the consciousness that had once been Queen Prismatica smiled, knowing that the universe would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.